All right, my friends, welcome back to the Audioholics live stream Friday edition. We got two heavyweights right here. We got, as you guys know, Dunn from Havens
What's up?
up, and we got David Frangioni. How you doing, David? It's great to have you back again for another live stream with us.
Well, the pleasure's all mine. I got such great feedback and response from the last one we did that this is something we want to make a regular now, and it's a privilege to be here with you guys and to share with everybody out there.
Awesome. Well, we always love having you. We like dropping more knowledge on people. I want to give a little background about who you are until we get a cadence going where people expect you regularly, kind of like what we did with Anthony Gramani. So before we talk about the immersive surround sound speaker layouts, I think we should talk about your background, what you do. Professionally, you're an installer, but you're also a content creator.
He is the integrator's integrator. He's a legend in integration.
Exactly. Yeah. So I know you have a slide presentation. I'd like to add it to the stream here, and then we can kind of go show some of the background of what you've done over the last couple of decades. Does that sound good?
Yeah, you want to start with that, and you'll take everybody through it. It's very, very abridged, but they'll kind of get the point, right?
So all I see right now is your iPad one, so you have to share your screen for the PowerPoint.
You bet. Let's go to the window, and let's go to get.
Or is that where formats go to die?
There we go. Okay.
So, best thing I've heard all day.
Here we go. Who's that little kid playing that big drum kit? Awesome.
He's 8-year-old David Frangioni, and started with no money, no connections, a dream of making music, and spent my whole childhood in and out of eye treatment because I lost my right eye to cancer. Thank God I survived overall, but a lot of trauma, and music was for sure, the way through all of that, not realizing at the time how much I truly loved it and that it was my calling. As we go fast forwarding, being involved in Pro Tools and that graphic in the upper left-hand corner of Sound Designer, that predated Pro Tools. That was Sound Tools, Sound Designer, then Sound Tools, and Pro Tools. And I helped, kind of forge ahead that technology very, very early. And when it got to the point where we could build entire studios around Pro Tools, I'm credited as, the first to do that and to kind of forge that lane. And what was really cool was to come full circle from a sample editing program on a Mac to a full-blown studio based around that technology as a multi-track, full-on integrated solution. And have that then become the first #1 song to hit Billboard, done entirely in Pro Tools, which Charles Dye and Desmond Child did, and I was involved in and a part of. So it was really kind of a full circle moment, if you will, of taking technology and music and seeing a new chapter being written. And then along the way, I've worked with quite a few different clients in many different capacities. And being on the Osbournes, just happened to be working with Ozzy at a time where they were filming the show. So that was a lot of fun. And working with Ozzy and Sharon and the kids was an incredible experience. They're amazing. And being with Aerosmith for, at this point, more of my life than not, has been an incredible journey, and working closely with those guys and doing a lot of projects. And I think the best compliment I ever got, and Gene, you might have even been one of the people that gave it to me, but being called a Renaissance man because of the different lanes that I've put a lot of time into traveling. And so that's just been, you can see over on the left, that's me discovering the drums again and kind of, finding, it's my brother in the background. What does he have? One of those Gueros? But then as we go much further along in 2018, published my third book. Well, the first two, this is my third book, but the first two I did with Clint, and he's amazing. He was kind enough to hold the third book, but he is the reason I have the first two. And then, being CEO, publisher, owner of Modern Drummer, we're about to enter our 46th year, which of course I've only owned it a few of those years, but it was founded by Ron Spagnardi in 1977. And I'm a lifetime student of audio and sound, as much as anything. And then of course we have all the integration stuff. So that's the short version of a long story.
You know, when you mentioned Pro Tools, I just had a little flashback because I just did a video about a week ago of the 10 albums I wish I could rediscover. And one of them was entirely done. I think it was done in Pro Tools. It was the Yes album Talk. I don't know if you're a Yes fan or not.
I'm a huge Yes fan, but what year was that album?
It was in the late 80s, maybe 90. It was Trevor Rabin produced the whole thing basically at his home studio using Pro Tools. I think it was the first album that they did where they did it like that. And it wasn't a commercial success, but I love that album. I think it's just a great album if you're a Yes fan.
Well, that's amazing. I got to check it out. You know, Pro Tools, maybe it was all done in a Fairlight, which was Trevor Rabin's axe at the time, the Fairlight Series 3, because Pro Tools came on the scene early 90s-ish, and wasn't so much of a full-on solution just because it was only 16 tracks,
Right.
which at the time was, you know, groundbreaking, right? I mean, in the 80s, we were happy to have 4 because all most systems had were 2. But Fairlight and Synclavier, the early pioneers of digital sampling and hard disk playback technology, which were proprietary systems, New England Digital, NED, did the Synclav out of Vermont and New England, and Fairlight did their Series 3 from Australia, and they were really, really powerful all-in-one workstations. They really paved the way for what could happen. And Pro Tools, you know, followed Sound Tools, which was a 2-channel system. Then Pro Tools became a 4-channel system, and then they figured out how to daisy chain sample accurately 4 of them. So that's how we got the 16 tracks. It was a 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4. And then they figured out how to daisy chain 3 16-channel systems in the mid-90s, and then we got 48 tracks. And then we were really onto something, and then it became 24-bit, because up till that point it was 16. And then from 24-bit, they figured out how to take the track count and put the 48 tracks or up to 64 tracks on one card. And at the time, we had 7-card NuBus systems before PCIe. And so the track counts were starting to get large enough that they could support entire sessions. And then, you know, it just grew from there. And, you know, I won't go through the whole history of Pro Tools, but the point is that it's really something to see how it's all progressed and how the sound quality has.
Hey, Dave, quick question for you. Have you seen the documentary series that Mark Ronson has on HBO? It's kind of like the history of music production. And I don't know if you've seen that or not. It's a great show.
I've seen it. It's
they did a whole episode
amazing
on Pro Tools. So
it's incredible. And that's something everybody should check out. And also, if you haven't seen it, Sound Breaking, which is out there, right? That was originally like a PBS thing. That is, I could watch that every day. That series.
Wow, I gotta
some
check
of
that
my
out.
clients are on there, but it's just awesome how they cover all the different aspects of music.
We should do a separate live stream on just recording and mixing in the studio, because you think about it, and I don't want to get off too far topic, but back in the 60s and 70s when you had bands like Steely Dan, they didn't have all this accessibility to this kind of technology, and they would basically go into the studio. I think Steve Gadd recorded the drum solo for Asia. I think he only recorded it twice, and they used the first session of it. So it wasn't like they had a bunch of tracks they could overlay. They played as a whole band when they recorded music back then, right? Like Miles Davis, for example, they played as a whole band. A lot of it was improv.
Well, it's true. It's you know, the Steely Dan stuff is a great example. I had the privilege of being a very close friend and collaborator with Roger Nichols, right? A 7-time Grammy winner. We lost Roger in 2011. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't pray for him and acknowledge him in my thoughts, because he was such an innovator and such a great friend. And what he did, he used to tell me so many stories. We worked on the 2 Against Nature surround mix and the 96K version. But we spent so much time together he was a close friend of mine for about 15 years. And the last 15 years of his life. And he said so many just insightful things and had such a perspective. And of course, all those sessions with Asia, Gaucho and Nightfly with Fagan. These are seminal albums for sound reproduction and the standards and reference material. And listening to what he did, and Elliot Shiner, of course, and whoever else was involved in these projects that produced such incredible audiophile grade playback, and the way that the musicians had to play. And as you said, Gene, there was it was all about having to capture, performances as opposed to putting together performances as music has evolved so much behind the scenes. So yeah, it's fascinating. We definitely should do a show about that. That's a great idea.
Sure. Yeah. All right. We have a quick super chat I just want to show real quick. Appreciate that, Sergio. He's asking if I could do a comparison video on the different receiver brands. Don, I think that's a good idea. I think you and I should collaborate and David, if you want to join in one of these days, we could add that to the list. I think that's a good topic. Just the strengths and weaknesses of each of the brands over the years.
Which is really cool because I've got a receiver that I'm evaluating and listening to now is probably the most musical receiver I've ever heard.
Which one?
It's the NAD 778, the flagship.
Nice.
It's actually, I wanted to try one out, as an integrator. It's a little quirky, if you know what I mean. Like the Japanese receivers are really smooth, the drivers and whatnot, not quirky in a bad way. Just I'm getting used to it. But as an actual sound reproduction piece of equipment, it's very musical. I really like the sound of it. So I'm demoing it on some really nice speakers and so far impressed. I mean, I don't know if you've had any experience with them or not.
I have. NAD, especially in the last couple of years, is just, they've always made great stuff. They were the first THX certified amplifiers, 25, 30 years ago. And now what they're doing with their surround pre-pro and receiver line is really groundbreaking. And the amps, the
Purify,
the digital circuits, man, so much headroom. Incredible signal to noise,
really warm sounding product,
and great sounding. And it's really kind of astounding because if you said that the amp cost twice as much as it does, you would believe it when you heard it.
Well, the guy that developed
great stuff.
The guy that developed the Class D amps for the flagship NAD stuff, it's a company called Purify, Bruno Puzzi's. We had him on our channel. He's one of the most brilliant amplifier designers I've ever met. And he's revolutionized Class D. He's the one that did the Hypex modules years ago, and now Purify amps are so low in distortion that I can't measure the distortion accurately with my audio precision. Like I need a better audio precision to do it. That's a testament because we're talking.
I'd like to demo their M33 integrated, a little integrated amp. That thing's supposed to, I really like the front panel display. I know it's quirky, but it's cool. But the dials on it and stuff, kind of like you have on your Anthem. But no, so far I'm impressed. I really like the product, so it's good to hear that.
Well, Anthem's the other one. That's the brother and sister of these not a lot of frills, even though they're functionally very complete. It's not like when a lot of people look at receivers, they go, well, this one has arena mode and movie plot.
German bathtub,
Roxy Theater.
Right. Roxy Theater. It's got 70 different halls, and it's like, all the marketing jargon aside, let's look at what you're going to use and what's going to matter when the playback is occurring, both audio and video wise. And Anthem and NAD happen to be in that price sector, right? We're not going
that next step up from.
We're not going into Steinway and Trinov and Macintosh and the next sphere of it, but in that really high end, but not as high priced category. Those are the two best products right now.
Oh, I agree.
I don't want to blow the whole story for the actual episode we're going to do it.
No, we'll revisit that. I think we need to get on topic because I know you have limited time. I think the first thing I want to ask you, there's 3 different immersive surround formats. You've got obviously Dolby Atmos, which is the standard. It's the streaming standard. It's the standard all Ultra HD Blu-ray. You've got DTS-X and DTS-X Pro now. And you've got Auro 3D, which has been around the longest, but there's almost no content for it, at least in the US. And there's no streaming for Auro 3D. And I see people on the forums, it's almost like a fetish now where they they take the Atmos track, down convert it to 5.1 or 7.1, so they only get the true HD or Dolby Digital Plus layer. Then they upmix it into an Oro upmixer with front and rear heights. And I think that's a compromise, because now you're not getting a true immersive surround sound experience anymore. You're getting almost a virtualized upmix. And I don't think it's worth compromising your speaker layouts to support a format that has no content. And I think going forward, people should support the one that's actually streaming content, because we've got tons of streaming music now with Dolby Atmos on Apple Music and Tidal. And really, in-ceiling speakers have a lot of advantages to do in the front and rear heights. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about and see if you agree with that, because you're also a content producer making these mixes.
Well, yes, I agree with it. I think that if somebody wants to have fun with Oral 360 or whatever format that they want to, kind of play with, then that's great. I mean, it's all about, entertainment and enjoyment and
who cares?
fulfillment, right? Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, I care if they're happy, that's great. But if we're trying, my goal as a content provider, so specifically mixing immersive, and then on the other side, as Don mentioned, being an integrator and then putting reference quality playback systems together to listen to that content. And I'm not really sure how many other people in the world are doing that. I've been told not many. And I would imagine, because it's a lot to kind of do, both. But I am and have been for my entire life. And I can tell you that it is as you said, Gene, it is absolutely the most predictable and best sound reproduction to take the content as it was made and intended, and by whoever made it and created it, and play it back that way. As far as the best playback, the most accurate, the most true and realistic, that's it. And then everything other than that is just someone's preference as to how they want to, cajole it.
Right. So as an integrator, someone that's done countless installs for immersive surround sound, what's the regular speaker format that you use for immersive audio? Like, is it a 7.2.4? Is it a 5.2.4? What do you say is the most common that people implement in their dedicated theater rooms?
Well, the theaters that I've been doing are 7.1.4. That's the most common. If the room's too small, then we do 7.1.2. If the room's really small or the client's goal is not immersive, then we do 5.1 or 7.1, of course, age-old formats, but that's what the client wants. But if I'm doing a reference theater for consumer playback sources, it's 7.1.4. If it's a reference theater for DCI, for actual Hollywood first-run movies, they call it the Bel Air circuit. As it turns out, it's for a group of people who have the rights and subscription to be able to play back first-run movies that are locked down, very, very secure. Very few people can do that. But in order to have a proper Dolby playback system for that format in a home, it's 9.1.6. So that's
9 being in the wide channels, right?
Mm-hmm, exactly. So it's a little bit different, little more immersive, wider channel count, of course. And, remember, a theater can have 64 channels and up for Atmos. So, so they've made the Hollywood requirement, a step above what the consumer standard typically is. And I can see why.
So for your height channels, are you doing in-ceiling speakers, or are you actually putting height channels at 30 degrees up on the front and back walls?
It depends on the physics of the room. If I have the choice of doing anything, I'll use in-ceiling. And for everything, on the 0.6, etc., and the two heights in front. If I have if I have all the options in the world, it's being built from scratch, let's say, and the ceilings are high enough and we can kind of do whatever we need to do, then I prefer using the in ceiling as much as possible. And then we have our fronts, of course, and then we have our sides and backs. I have some diagrams that if you want to start, that Gene, you and I kind of devised here, got from Dolby, but
and David, a lot of people don't realize how good architectural speakers are now versus what they were even 20 years ago. I mean, they're way better than they ever have been.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, of course. And that's a great point, Don. I think that I really encourage enthusiasts and anyone who really wants to understand this in terms of what's happening in speaker playback, besides the specifics, the specifications that we're reviewing now, as far as what actually these speakers sound like. You really got to kind of revisit that subject a minimum of every 2 years. If you're really into it, you want to know. You can trust guys like us, and that works out great, and many clients do that. But if you want to also have a say in it, or just have you enjoy doing it yourself, you can't. Even 10 years ago, it's changed so much. Now the speakers last. It's not like you have to upgrade every 2 years. I'm not saying that at all, because you certainly don't. The time frames are much, much longer. But if you want to understand what's going on, to your point, there's some marked improvements being made at least every 2 years. And as speakers are getting more and more aesthetically discrete in terms of their visuals and their possibilities for placement, the sound quality also happens to be improving. If timing is everything. So if you're looking at building something, in the near future, we'll be looking at solutions that are available right now or coming soon. And that's going to offer, the greatest balance of aesthetics and sound quality.
It's getting harder and harder to find bad speakers these days. I mean,
to
some extent, it's true.
Category.
No, Gene, you're right. It really, I mean, unless you really get down there and you're just like, oh, well, I only want to spend, $200 or $300 a speaker. There's a lot of acceptable options. What really determines like where your system fits in the value proposition is how big the room is and what your options are for where you can place them. So the more possibilities you have physically in your room, the more value you can bring into that proposition. Where things can fall apart is where you have very limited location possibilities, and your budget might be a little limited. And when that happens, that's when you start noticing the biggest differences, right? Or you have a really large room. And so before we can even get to the point where we're looking at, what are the offsets and, what's the sweet spot for the seating position, which is, we all know, we build the whole room around. Before we even get to those considerations and we start specifying, you've got a lot of volume to fill, right? So right off the bat, you can't cheap out on that, when the room's that size, because we've got to, even in a large room, we've got to shrink the room, right? Because it's still one seating position that the person who has hired you is going to be sitting in, that everything is based around. So now if you've got to hit that seating position from much longer distances or heights, or both, then right off the bat, you've got to cleanly and sonically move that air. And that brings,
a lot of it too.
Up a lot.
Yeah. And let's be honest, we want to create every seat a good seat, but at the end of the day, there is an MLP.
Well,
100%. No, every seat is not a good seat. Anybody who builds a theater around that is really not, it's not full disclosure. You've got sweet spots, and every seat should be pleasant sounding. You shouldn't have a place where all you hear is bass, or, you're not getting anything from the fronts or backs. Like, there's clearly, you need a balance. You got to design your room and set expectations around, what the balances are going to be and what people can expect based on what row they're in and what seat they're in that row. but the sweet spot is the sweet spot. It's like when I build recording studios, it's the same thing. Sure. There's a sweet spot. And then the next thing is in the studio, the next thing after sweet spot is what's the console, what's the speakers, and you define those very early on, and the entire room evolves from that. Same thing in the theater. What's the sweet spot, and where does the client want to sit? Are they a front row person? Are they a mid theater person? Are they a back row person? And then that becomes the sweet spot. And then from there, projector and screen, right? And then once that's defined, which is kind of console and speakers, parallel to the studio world, then everything else gets specified. And as we know, there's no one size fits all. We're going to go through layouts here. We're going to talk about the specifications, but how those are actually installed and configured changes every single room, every single client.
Hey, Dave, as we roll into that, sorry. I just wanted to mention, more often than not, most of my rooms now, a lot of them are great rooms, family rooms, especially in Florida. That's kind of a general plan. And we're able to actually do some pretty amazing sounding systems, as Gene found out when we did his house, in these areas with these architectural products. They're not theater room ideal, but they're pretty darn good. I would assume you've probably done quite a few of those yourself.
Yes. And I distinguish, as you said, Don, between, a multimedia room, family room, great room kind of thing, compared to a screening room, right? A proper home theater. And in Florida and in LA too, for that matter, there's a lot of what I'll call lifestyle rooms, which in the past, those rooms not being dedicated viewing experiences never really sounded or looked that great, right? And the room never really adhered to, to much attention to detail. So there's this is the past I'm talking about. There's a lot of ambient light, and if you even had 5.1, it would be a big deal. But man, have things really, really evolved to where these multimedia rooms now are Atmos. Now, Gene, to your point earlier, those rooms tend to be 712, not 714.
Yes.
And we really don't need the 714. There's so many people sitting in so many different spots that 712 gets it done. And then you're looking at, really beautiful screen. Sometimes even a television with a drop screen, and maybe even a drop projector, or the projector may be enclosed in a soffit. Really sophisticated multimedia rooms. And most of the time, those replace a theater. The client either doesn't want an enclosed space, doesn't have a rigid enough audio and video requirement that they need a dedicated theater, or just aren't into dedicated theaters enough. Any one of those three things, but they want an elevated experience in their multimedia room. And Don, we can do some amazing
lots
things.
of those. I think dedicated theaters kind of went out of vogue for a while in the building industry, and now you're starting to see them come back.
Big time.
Yeah.
There was a lull.
Yeah, they're a little bit of a lull when they were the multi-purpose gathering areas or media areas / game room or whatnot. But now you're seeing more and more dedicated theaters come back, which fills my heart.
Yeah.
Well, mine too, because there's nothing like it. Look, what drives this and should drive it, quite frankly, is the content. And when you can watch day and date movies, and you're watching Wonder Woman 84 or Cruella, or Dune, or whatever movie you choose, and the same day that people are lined up at a theater, or listening
right there.
Look, I went to a commercial theater to see Quiet Place 2. Now, anybody who knows that movie, right? Most of the movie is huge dynamic range where they really are quiet, and that's a huge part of the whole feel of the movie. And then when things jump, you jump out of your seat, and it's just this really, really compelling movie. Well, my foray back to a commercial theater during this pandemic, as I said, really, that was the first movie, pandemic-wise, in a theater. And a family of 12 came into the movie about 10 minutes in, sat right behind the row I was in, all 12 of them across, And there was nothing quiet about A Quiet Place 2. It was the most horrendous experience I could ever have in a movie. Destroyed it. I had to go home and watch it again in my own theater when it finally came to streaming. So my point is not don't go to movies, but my point is there's enough clients out there who have experienced what I have over many years, not just pandemic wise. Now the content catches up, and you know, we don't have to wait 3 months to see a movie we really wanted to enjoy. And when you can do that at home, in the safety of your home, in the controlled environment of your home, there's nothing like it. If you can do it, why not?
And you can pause to go to the bathroom. That's the best part.
Yeah, 100%. Or pause because, you know, you have a meeting starting and you want to go back the next day, or, you know, whatever. It's just, it's so convenient and so powerful. And that's a big reason why they're coming back into style. And I'm seeing kind of an interesting thing, especially at the very high end, where I'm seeing clients that will still have a dedicated theater, but within that, they want a more multimedia layout. So the performance of the theater is 100% world-class home theater, but they're like, well, you know, if I hit a light, if I had a switch, the lights do this or that. And now it's like guys' night out for a sporting event, and we'll do a masking screen, and now it'll be this giant 16:9, or we'll use a Mad VR. We'll do virtual wide, or, you know, all these things that in a traditional home theater setup, you know, that's not a requirement, but it's certainly becoming one now, because people don't want to feel like they're quote unquote cooped up in a theater all the time. Sometimes they want that traditional movie experience. Sometimes they want their friends to just have a good time. And it's like, hey, let's drink and eat and watch the game, or, you know,
have a bar in there.
Show. And
I did a motorized screen that dropped down in front of 5 TVs. So when they pulled the screen up, they wanted to have that multimedia, you know, Sunday football game day, they could have that. Then when they want to watch a movie, that screen would drop in front of it. And that's exactly what you're talking about.
So that's definitely very popular now. And the technologies, you know, the content drives it, and the technologies being at least somewhat reasonable or affordable. I know that's a wildly huge range, because affordable, it changes. $10,000 is unattainable to some people, and it's like very, very possible for other people. And so your budget ranges change greatly within that. But, you know, there were times when if you wanted to see a multi-screen view and you wanted to have on one screen go between a full screen, or, you know, PIP, or, you know, 3 boxes on the bottom with 3 different games, all on a single display, not using multiple displays. You know, that technology was crazy expensive, and it was really only for the most luxurious buyers. And now that's come down market quite a bit without sacrificing a lot of performance. So now, you know, people can say, well, you know what? Yeah, let's add that. And it's not going to be tens and tens of thousands of dollars. So, you know, that's helping a lot too, where people can realize what their vision is and still have it be, you know, able to be pulled off.
So I want to ask you a question about the wides, because I do think there's a lot of viability in having a wide channel. One is, how much of the Atmos music content that you're mixing actually utilizes the wides? Number 2 is, currently the Dolby Upmixer, when you go from 2-channel and you upmix your music, currently it doesn't use the wides. I heard rumors that they're updating the Upmixer to incorporate the wides. I don't know if you can confirm or deny that. And then number 3, if you can't put wides on the floor because your room is not wide enough, how viable do you think it is putting them in the ceiling with angled baffled speakers, like the Triad and RBH Sound and all these different companies now have in ceiling speakers where the woofer and the tweeter are 30 degrees angled towards the listener? And I did that in my room, and with Don's suggestion, and I think it works out really well. But I'm wondering, is it worth going that effort and putting wide channels into your system if you can do it?
If you can do it, yes. But it's going to pay off, you know, more in the future, and now not so much. You know, of course, there's some material coming out that uses it, but you know, it's really, so Gene, if we want to back up for a second, do we want to kind of go over these different layouts, or is this too basic for our viewers?
I think most of the viewers know these traditional Dolby layouts. I think their questions more have to do with actual placements and if is one scenario better than another.
Okay.
It's kind of Don is attested to this. It's kind of hard to always follow the Dolby guidelines and I think rules of thumbs of where you could put those Atmos channels. It's better than not having any Atmos channels at all. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that. I've also, in my experience, and Don, I believe, would agree with this, we tend to put the Atmos channels a little bit closer together than the main speakers. I don't know what you think about that. Like, I know the diagrams show that they're equidistant as the mains, but I tend to like bringing that focus in a little bit. What do you think about that?
Well, can we see this slide? Can everybody see
Yeah,
this?
let me zoom in on
Yes,
that
sir.
so everybody sees it even better.
All right. So I think this is I think this can form kind of the map for what we're talking about and what Dolby. This is direct from Dolby. But I think it's really important to understand this. This is without wides, of course, right? So these are just two sets of heights, and hence the 714. And this, without a doubt, is the most common, not just for my installations or Don's, but everybody. This is the standard of what you do when you for typical Dolby Atmos. This also, to answer your previous question, Gene, is the standard for mixing in the studio. So you can see there's no wide there. So we're not mixing into wide right now for music. Of course, it's different for film, but for music, as you said correctly, this is the configuration. In some configurations, actually, it's 712 for music as well, but I always mix in 714.
This is an interesting comment if you want to look at it real quick. So the diagram is a bit deceiving, maybe, the way they're placing those the width of those.
Yeah, I mean, the back speakers more often than not have to go further
in the back
behind.
wall.
Yeah, it's just
that's
not
if
super
you look
realistic
at
for most,
six, this is for discussion. This isn't to say that this is what you do. I think it's easier to talk about this stuff when you're looking at a diagram than just kind of talking everything just being words. So this is direct from Dolby. I don't put, if you look at number 8, the left and right, top, rear, overhead speakers, I don't put them behind the backs, right? Which they are in this, right?
Correct.
So I put, and I think you all said that as well, Gene, that if you
look those front height
8,
channels are too far forward. I like to put my Atmos speakers plus or minus 20 degrees from the MLP.
The 7 and 8 are both not how I install the overheads. I don't put them where they have them in this. I put the 7 and 8, first of all, much more of a tighter square and inside of what we'll call the 7.1. So if we look at the 7.1 and we're looking at how Dolby's defined it here with left, right, center, as they've said, numbers 2 and 3. And then you look at your traditional surround speakers at 5, which we call sides, right? And then rear surrounds, which we typically call backs. That setup is fairly close to how a 7.1 would go. I would typically put the sides pretty close to where they have it. The 90 to 110, kind of gives us enough leeway, let's say, to get where we need to go. The backs on the back, I don't typically fire them 135 to 150 as much. I tend to place them so they hit that spot as opposed to use the latitude we have in the where how they're saying to angle them, right? So I'd like to physically get them where they go, and then they'll hit that directivity. And then the square of the 4 speakers for overheads is tighter, and if we're using this diagram, pulled much further forward than this is. And now you have a 7.1. It almost looks right in the bottom right. If you look at that, where you see how they've put the overhead.
You're right.
That's actually That's
exactly
actually
what we
closer
do.
to how it really
Yep.
is, right? And then those
Yeah,
back
agreed.
speakers are further back, and of course, we haven't installed speakers on stands like that in 500 years.
No, we use flush mount,
right,
sides and rears most of the time,
almost
or on
always,
walls.
or
On
cabinet
walls.
speakers if they want, if that's
or in
how it
walls,
demands
you know, mostly
for the
in walls.
aesthetic. In wall and
Yeah.
ceiling, exactly.
Yeah.
But this is great for the diagram, right? We're trying. This is a reference tool from which
Suggestion.
to then make decisions from this. This isn't a literal setup. And so that's what I typically find.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, when Dolby shows these stand-mounted speakers, nobody's really doing that because it eats up a room, as Don said. The thing you don't want to do is eat up a small room that's already not that big. So putting flush
Right.
mount or on walls for your sides and backs makes your
Yeah.
room seem bigger. It gets the speakers further away from the listening
Yep.
area because you don't want a speaker right up to the couch.
Rooms shrink real quick when you start adding gear to them, as we talked about.
Well,
when
and,
we were designing
and I
the
think
theater.
I don't want to speak for Dolby, but I would imagine these are just to make it much
Illustrative, yeah.
simpler
Yeah.
to understand where speakers go, but not literally go. And I mean, what's the last time I saw?
But people
speakers
take it as religion,
stands
though.
like
That's the
Cambridge
thing.
Soundworks or something.
They do. They look at
They
this as a
take it-
biblical source, though. That's the
Yeah,
problem.
I'm sure.
Well,
I'm
that's
surprised
look,
Tool's
that's
not on it.
why that we're sharing this information, like the 714, where it shows here, it refers the number of traditional speakers, the number of subwoofers, the number of Dolby Atmos speakers, etc. That's the kind of reference. I think a lot of people, you need an integrator if depending on how far you're going to really take it, right? I mean, if you're really going to take it, if you really want world class, and you don't want to take the long road, then you need someone, you need an integrator, and a lot of that stuff is taken care of.
So, Dave, you know what I find interesting is when you could find clever ways of getting surround sound into a room that don't follow that exact guideline. Don and I did a perfect case study of this in my family room. I don't have sidewalls because I have like a 15-foot slider. I could have put on-wall speakers for the side channels.
It would look like crap.
It would have looked like crap. Don's like, don't do that. Don't worry about the back channels in this case. We put Paradigm has these speakers called the Elite 80As. And I think they're an 8-inch angled baffle on 30 degrees. I put those further, wider apart than my Atmos speakers in back, angled them at the listener. Then I had 4 in-ceiling Atmos speakers firing down a little bit more forward. And I can't believe the amount of immersion I get in that system. Like, I just did not expect it to sound as good as it did. And it's non-conventional. It's not ideal to have your in-ceiling speakers as your surrounds and your Atmos, but the fact that I had angled baffled speakers firing directly at the listener as opposed to the Atmos speakers that were more tightly in a square formation firing down, it tricks your brain into thinking there are layers even when they're on the same plane.
No, it's awesome. And so the backs, you get a good sense of back soundstage when material's going back there. And obviously a lot of it's ambient or it's meant to be moving, from one place to another. And it's and you can hear it, like, it's because that's the toughest thing, is to get the backs, whether they're perfect world or whether they're a variation like the one you've implemented, whatever it is, the backs are tough. They're just to get that balance and to really get them to sit, where they belong in a mix.
That's my go-to open, like, great room Atmos deployment is a 5-1-4 with the 2 backs angled, then the 4 Atmos speakers placed correctly as much as possible in the room. That's really worked out good. I tried to do a 7-1-4 on it, and it just got a little bit of ceiling acne for the client.
It's too much.
With can lights and everything. So it's really turned out good with the right speed. Again, great products like the Paradigm.
Love Paradigm.
Has great product.
I'm a big Paradigm fan.
List goes on.
Again, it's Anthem. It's like we talked about earlier. It's
absolutely fantastic products, man.
All the same family. And but that's great.
Flush mount JL audio subs in that room, which it's really slick.
It is. I got to do a video just Yeah,
Love their
we have
subs.
we have the 13-inch in-wall subs in there, and they're right behind the Paradigm Premier 800Fs, which are a very neutral speaker. And I'm soon to be upgrading. I'm going to have both Paralisten and the Founder series, so we're going to be kind of doing a shootout there. It's a good time to be alive right now as an audioholic, because all
Yeah.
these great speakers are coming in, and we're playing with the best gear in the industry. And
Just
I
so
love
Dave
that.
knows, the whole idea behind this Audioholics house was to make a statement. He has a dedicated, super high-end theater, a great family room. We've got a flush mount with a Klipsch reference LCR soundbar for the front, with all flush
For the
mount,
bedroom, yeah.
dual in-ceiling subs, excuse me. So we've got a representation, a dedicated 2-channel room of the environments that our followers and clientele are likely to have, and stuff we can measure in, which I think you appreciate as an integrator, having that ability to do things in various different rooms.
Yeah, absolutely. And the 13-inch JLs, I have 2 of them in my theater. The cabinets, the F113s, the cabinet version of the in-wall, and they really defy logic. Like the volume they can play at,
They're clean,
and the cleanliness of that bottom. That I just can't believe it. I mean, I just can't believe they don't bottom out at some of the sound effects that are going through there. It's really, JL's really
big motor, big surround, big travel, clean amp, good DSP tuning, good build quality. I mean, I've been to their plant in Miramar, and it was just watching them assemble the woofers and stuff was incredibly humbling to see the amount of engineering that goes into that company.
Yeah, it's awesome. They're neighbors.
Hey guys, listen, I have to jet. And I apologize, David. It's an honor. Hopefully, we can do this receiver thing soon. Then maybe we could do a couple. You could do a couple case studies of projects that you've done, so people can see this. If you could put something together, that'd be wonderful. I think people would be really interested to see that. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Don.
Pleasure.
Sorry,
we'll talk to you soon, Don.
All right, cheers.
Thank you, Don.
So David, I know you have to go soon
too.
I have one last question. I think the common question I've been seeing in this thread. Okay, there we go. The common question I've been seeing in this thread is if you had to choose between 5.2 or 5.1.2 or 7.1. I'm sorry. So if you had to choose between 4 in-ceiling speakers or 2 in-ceiling speakers and put back channels, what would be your preference?
That's what I would do.
What you would have the back channels?
Yeah. So you're talking about 7.1.2
as opposed to 5.1.4. Yes.
Yeah. Definitely do the 7.1.2. And there's a lot of reasons for it, but the first is that there's way more going on in the 7 channels than in the height channels. So you don't want to miss that playback. The audio play, we'll call it, in the mixing process between fronts, sides, backs is much more active, if you will, and defined than the overheads, which are used for more effects or subtle just nuances that are even if you can't play those back at all, do 7.1, right? But if you can add the 2, that a 5.12 is better than a 7.1, right? So you get some Atmos, right?
Yes.
But
if
we can get the 0.2, then do that as opposed to do the 7.1 and then just have 2 Atmos, so you do at least get that. And remember, as a lot of people know out there, if you have to do the forward firing, which just sit on your front speakers, I use them in my theater as the wides. So I'm 7.1.6, but there's 4 heights and 2 wides. And obviously the processor can support that, etc. But I just did the wides as upward firing Dolby Atmos modules. And it's okay. It's better than, like, there's a difference.
The thing I notice about wide speakers, the first generation ones were horrible because they were just a whizzer cone. They didn't have any directivity control, and they used that dreaded 8-element crossover from Dolby, which is you don't need, in my opinion. But the newer wides, or the newer Atmos modules that actually have a waveguide on the tweeter to control dispersion, they can work limited in terms of giving you overhead effects, but they definitely increase the width or the sound stage of the front speakers. So to use them as a wide is actually a good idea. I would actually want to do some testing on that, not as using it as a height channel, but using it as a wide channel. If you can't put floor standing speakers and you can't put another set of speakers in the ceiling with angled baffles, it might be an interesting case study to use those as wide channels.
That's what I did.
As you are.
And it's worked. But if, again, it's all, some installations, especially not the highest end, not where you're starting from an empty room, right? And you bring a construction crew in. And most installations are not that, right? So you've got to be able to find solutions that, that are retro. And sometimes you can't get cables, in the ceiling to a certain spot, but you can get them on the floor, or you can get them around the wall or whatever. So those upward firing, I don't want to say better than nothing to sound negative, because when anybody says better than nothing, the first thing you think is, oh, that they're no good, right? Because nothing is, and better is like such a close proximity. But I'm not saying that. I'm saying they're better than not hearing those channels. And so and like you said, Gene, first gen, we wouldn't necessarily say that. We might say, like, forget the channels right now, because you're really just going to be mushing it up, or having some soundtracks sound okay and other soundtracks not. So I think that getting those 0.2, if you can't physically find a place to put the 0.2, because if the questions coming in are, well, do I do 514 or 712? That might also be because of space limitations, or the amount of channels their processor has, or whatever. So do the 712 and put them between the front speakers and the side speakers, a little closer to the sides than not, in terms of where you are front to back depth, location wise, and then follow the angles that we're talking about. And that's going to give you the overheads. And, it's really, scenes where it's raining, or, or some of the music stuff that we're mixing where, there's some really cool things kind of traveling there. You hear a difference, and it's really fun to hear that and to experience that. It's elevated from not having it. So that would be my answer.
So to be clear, the .2 would be forward of the listening area, basically. It would be in
a little bit, yeah.
So the cool thing about that is, if you want to add another pair of Atmos speakers later, you could put them behind the listening area.
And then you'll have a nailed 714.
Right.
And that's part of my thought process with doing that, is eventually, once you hear it, maybe you'll find a way to even get the other two when you can, or get a processor that can do it, or whatever the limitation is. But in the meantime, you'll get some of that overhead that's that's there, and that will make a difference.
Right. So now
I hate to answer long-winded, but I'm trying to simplify, one size fits all.
Right. Understood. So last question for you on the wides again. It sounds like the music that you're mixing in Atmos, some of which is on Apple Music now, right? The spatial audio, some of the mixes you're doing there.
Yeah, which is great.
It sounds like none of it has wide content yet. Like it won't use the wide channel.
Not yet. It's 7.1. The system is optimized for 712 or 714. And it's really based around heights, but no, even in movies. I mean, all of this surround technology was born in the movie theaters.
Yeah.
No matter what format we look at, but let's just look at today's, and not, look at the history of it. Let's just look today. Atmos has been in consumer surround products for decoding for years now. And so the fact that Apple just adopted it in June, is groundbreaking, and it's going to forge many, many years ahead of us for much better audio listening and mixes. But it started in the movies, and even in consumer movie soundtracks. If you look at what's coming in, and you look at the decode, it's not more than 714. There's very little coming in the wide channel. Theater, different story. I'm not talking about theatrical. Or first run movie Bel Air circuit, which is basically theatrical, even though it's in a home. I'm talking about consumer Dolby playback. And
Right.
so that's really where it's falling. So every one of these channels that are encoded and that we can decode and play back accurately, the better the experience. But if you get 714 or 724, which is also, I should add, it's very common because one sub is for the LFE and the other sub is for extending the rest of the speaker's bass management. That's my preferred setup is 724. But when you get to that point, you're playing back the soundtracks as they were intended,
As they were
in the
recorded.
consumer world, and they sound incredible. It's just a lot of fun, which is what all this is for entertainment.
Do you think we're going to see lossless Atmos streaming, or do you think it's always going to be Dolby Digital Plus?
I'm a huge lossless fan. I have a dedicated audiophile system for 2-channel 96K or whatever the highest res I can find content in that I want to hear, and vinyl, of course. So I'm all about that. Anything's possible at this point. It's with the bandwidth availability of cellular and IPs in the home over broadband, increasing exponentially quickly. Wi-Fi 6 and Wi-Fi 6E and all of the things that are coming out. It's possible because we'll actually technologically be able to stream it without dropouts and the whatnot, which is a big part of it. Apple's not going to get, I don't think Apple's going to get behind anything that isn't foolproof, right? Because they want their listeners to have a very, very pleasurable experience without dropouts. And that's lossless Atmos is a lot of bandwidth. So it could come, all the technologies underlying components are there. And it could be in a while, but right now, man, what we can enjoy right now, as Gene, we're both, you and I, huge proponents of like you said it best, because I say that all the time. It's a great time to be a home theater enthusiast and an audiophile and someone who gets great enjoyment from elevated playback experiences. It's never been better.
And I want to share just real quick with our audience. I listened to the entire Coldplay album with Coloratura, which I think is probably the best song written in the last decade. I listened to that in Atmos on Apple Music, and it was surreal. It was just incredible. If you like that song and you like the band and you listen to that in Atmos and all the just spaciousness of the recording you don't hear in 2-channel, it's almost like a religious experience if you're really an audiophile. So I wanted to just shout that out to people to check that out on Apple Music. I think Tidal has it as well. But that new Coldplay album, I don't even remember the name of it. I just know the song Coloratura. Have you heard that, David?
No.
Go listen to it. It's a 10-minute song.
Oh, I will after this.
Yeah. Oh man, I didn't realize that Chris Martin had that much chops on the piano. I mean, it's progressive. It reminds me of what made progressive rock great a couple of decades ago. They basically did that, modernized the sound on that song, and it really took that band to the next level. I just never expected a song like that out of Coldplay.
Well, this is Carl Palmer's logo, CP.
Right.
So this is one of the innovators of prog rock, kind of credited with inventing it with his bandmates Greg Lake and Keith Emerson. But I'll tell you, I was in the studio recently cutting tracks with a world famous artist, not immersive, We were cutting tracks for stereo mixes that'll come out next year. And but I played him. He was in my studio, which is, as you know, immersive heaven. And so I said, look, do you know about immersive? And he knew about it, but wasn't really deep into it. His catalog hadn't been done in immersive yet. I said, well, I just want you to hear it. And it's really what's in, it's not even the next thing. It's like now. And so he listened to it through the speakers. He was speechless. And then after that, he goes, well, what happens when somebody listens to it in headphones? And I said, well, then you get the binaural mix, which of course I played him a mix I had done through the speakers. And with every, proper discrete Atmos mix, we have a binaural counterpart, right? It all is part of the same spec. So I said, well, listen to what we did in binaural. And he's very skeptical. He puts the headphones on, listens to the exact same piece. So everything was referenced, so it's no games, just like, okay, I played you this minute in the speakers. Here's this minute, same minute in the headphones. Takes the headphones off, says, well, wait a second, this doesn't make any sense. That sounds to my ears almost exactly like what I just heard in the speakers. Like it's nothing like 2-channel. And I said, now you understand spatial audio. And he literally called his manager from the studio and said, I'm putting Frangioni on the phone. We're doing my whole catalog like this. I've never experienced anything like it. So what's my point is that as people have those experiences, which again, it takes time. This format's there's not even 6 months old in the music space. It's like, that's what's going to energize it. Because as you described, Gene, they are religious experiences. He had a religious experience listening to music, and he was completely skeptical. Before I hit play, he even said to me, because I've known him, I've worked with him for 30 years. And he's like, is this another one of your bionic ears thing that I'm going to hear the reverb tail 4 seconds from now, and I wouldn't hear it if I did this instead of that and all? No, this is not that. This is that on steroids. Everybody hears this. And he's like, okay. And then by the time he left, it was like, wow, this is why it's so cool and such.
So are you mixing new content, or are you taking the old Emerson, Lake and Palmer stuff and using all the studio tracks from that may not have been on the original recordings and turning that into immersive? Is that what's going to happen?
Well, the ELP stuff, they're going to announce what we're doing next year. So stay tuned. It's some app. Carl has some amazing things in store, live as well as otherwise. And you're not going to.
Why don't we get him on? Why don't we get him on the channel and talk about it?
Well, I'll ask him. He's home right now. He just got back from a very successful North American tour. I'll ask him if he is able to do it. And there was an article in Rolling Stone that we can talk about, of course, because it was printed online recently, and it said ELP reunites, and of course, E and L have passed away. So it's like, how is that going to work? And they described how Carl has envisioned and is putting together, the Keith and Greg live to interact during concert. And that's what I'm working on with Carl and Bruce Pilato, his manager. And it's going to be awesome. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Carl's drumming and the music. So it's double adventure for me, because I envision as a fan how exciting this is going to be to experience in the audience. So
could you imagine hearing Tarkus or Take a Pebble in immersive surround? Could you imagine, like, especially Tarkus?
I'm going to look at the list for a second, and I'm going to tell you, I can't give anything out because that wouldn't be right. But let me look. I have right here. Okay, what were they?
Tarkus, Take a Pebble. Pirates is my favorite ELP song, I think, out of all of them. It's just an incredible song. I even like Memoirs of Officer and a Gentleman, even though the album Love Beach was a failure commercially. That song is just a beautiful song. I'd love to hear that in surround sound.
Well, you're going to be very, very happy to see what comes out next year. I think a lot of people are, and it's very exciting. So stay tuned for Carl Palmer. Go to carlpalmer.com and you'll see all the latest and greatest that he's announcing that we're working on, and that as it's going to be released. But he has quite a long tour scheduled throughout the world starting next year. I think it's going to go on for a year or two. And a lot of what we're working on is for that. And you're going to love it, Gene. You're going to love it. You're a fan like I am. So,
yeah, definitely. So last question I wanted to ask you, and I'll let you go. If somebody wants to hear if they want to do this demo that you're talking about, where you hear the spatial audio, then you put the headphones on and you hear the binaural recording, can that happen with any spatial audio mix that's on Apple Music, or do you have special recordings for that? Do they automatically switch over to binaural when you have headphones?
Well, yeah. If you're in 2-channel, if you're listening on AirPods, or 2-channel, then yes. And then, of course, as you know, to actually decode, you have to be in a multi-speaker setup, right?
Yeah.
So this was done in my studio, where we have a set of headphones being fed from the binaural, and then we have all of the speakers in the room that we mix through. So it's a discrete setup. So yeah, you would have to go typically in a home theater and decode it and listen to it discreetly, and then put on your AirPods and stream the same mix, which is the binaural, which is really most people only hear the binaural of what we're doing, but it's great. I mean, it's a huge difference. And I'll tell you, for anybody interested in what Gene's referring to, I'll give you a much simpler A/B. So you don't have to deal with decoding and all the speakers everywhere and everything else. Take Sgt. Pepper. Take the Sgt. Pepper album, the original stereo mix, or remix, if you will, because they redid it for the 50th anniversary, as we all know. That's straight stereo. That's still on Apple Music. Listen to that. Then listen to the spatial audio, which is tagged differently so you can see which one's which. And listen to the spatial audio of Sgt. Pepper. And take one song, whatever your favorite song is on that, listen to it in stereo, then go to the spatial audio version, and that'll tell the whole story right there.
You're talking about in your surround system or with headphones?
No, headphones. I'm talking about the simplest, fastest way to go between the stereo world we've known for a long time and the spatial audio world, using the exact same material.
Right. Now, do you think head tracking
by Giles Martin?
Now, do you think head tracking is necessary to really appreciate the benefit of that? That's why you were saying the Apple AirPods, because I think those have head tracking in them now, right?
They're just the most popular, in-ears. So this is like everybody's
the most
right.
common.
This is because you can get so deep in the weeds that by the time we describe what you or I might do, or someone who's really into all the audiophile reference, there's 500 steps, right? And so it's like, I don't want to be bothered, or I don't have that equipment or whatever. This is like, how does anybody on earth hear the difference? And it's like, okay, an iPhone and AirPods, and then here's the content. Go to Sgt. Pepper. It's in both formats. It's in straight stereo, and it's in spatial audio through 2 channels. And that's it. You'll hear the difference.
Awesome. Well, David, I know you got to go. It's getting late. I appreciate you here dropping this knowledge, giving us the integrator's perspective, but also the mixing perspective. What an awesome thing to have both ends of the spectrum here for our audience. Really appreciate that. We got to have you back to do more of these kind of videos. We'll do the receiver one as well. I'll just come up with a list of topics and we'll just keep going. Hopefully we could do it. Maybe we could do it on Fridays if that's a good time for you. Maybe we can make this a regular thing a couple of times a month at least.
Look, I love being here with you and on all the listeners. We're all unified by our passion for audio and how important it is to us. That's, we're all audioholics.
Yes.
And that's
like
really
that.
that's what it really comes down to. And that's a beautiful thing. It's like being a fan of a band or in a car club or, whatever, your passions are that are so much more enjoyable in collaboration. And so it's great. I really appreciate being here and being here with everyone, and very grateful to you, Gene. And thank you everyone for listening.
Awesome, guys. Well, that's a wrap. Don't forget about our Patreon channel at patreon.com/audioholics. We appreciate your support. Get direct access to me if you want to ask questions or suggest video topics. I'll put a link down below to David Frangioni and all the different services that he offers if you want to find out more about that. And until next time, my friends, keep listening. And that is a wrap.